What a day of practice. We've had two huge courses lined up here in Finale Ligure, over 2 massive days of racing. Before we get stuck into our E-enduro course, let's check out our UCI Enduro World Cup course and see what our athletes have in store. Riders will be treated with a shuttle to the top of the NATO base and deliver them to stage 1, base NATO, a fast and furious start to our 2024 racing action. Stage 2 is back to the NATO base with Ingegnere, a very physical test, a very technical test before riders head to the longest stage of the weekend. Stage 3, Super Gruppo, 7.2 kilometers in length and a biggest physical challenge our riders will face. From the finish of stage 3, they liaise all the way back up to stage 4, Rocky Gianchi, a very technically and visually stimulating course that brings us to the famous, the iconic, the one, the only, stage 5, Downhill Men's. It makes its return to enduro racing and delivers our riders to the coastline of the Ligurian Sea to wrap up round 1 of our 2024 UCI Enduro World Cup season opener. We're here with two megastars of our UCI Enduro World Cup, Charlie Murray and Isabeau Cordeiro. They've been out there on course today practicing. We're about to hear what they have to think of today's course. Stage 1, straight from base NATO. It's iconic, this area. Isabeau, tell us about stage 1.
I think stage 1 is a pretty good one. It's obviously the one you always do first when you come to Finale. And the first part is quite fun with some nice turn when you can keep it flow. And I think the tricky part on this is to know when to pedal and when to kind of refrain from it to keep the flow. So yeah, it's gonna be quite difficult to do tomorrow on the first one of the year.
That's right, first stage of the year. So how do you gauge that? Are you gonna go just full gas straight from the gun, or do you have to work into this day?
Most of the time on the very first stage, I go full on, then I almost crash, and then I kind of, step a bit of the gas and say, okay, calm down. So probably tomorrow is gonna be no different. And I think the first one is always the most difficult to manage. Like you have all of the pressure releasing at this point, so it's the most difficult to find the good, just the right spice.
The right spice. And speaking of spice, stage 2, Charlie, Engineer. It's a classic of Finale. We've ridden it a lot, but racing it is a different story. Tell us about stage 2.
It's just way harder than it looks. Like you ride it when you're out there with your buddies and it's heaps of fun, and then you got to race it and you just have to pedal everywhere. So like you start and there's quite a lot of support in the corners, and you can there's a bit of a bobsled section, a few rock hops, it's really fun. And then as you get down, the corners disappear and it's just tight and it's quite flat and you have to pedal out of every corner. So I think to race that, it's really going to separate the the men from the boys and the women from the girls.
Oh, this is a horrible right. I mean, a horrible left. You want to just creep it. Easy gear.
And it's very long, like it's quite a long physical stage. So speaking of that full gas mentality, do you have to gauge it? Do you have to kind of measure that effort on a stage like that?
I've been thinking about that a lot today, actually. I'm trying to make my sort of race plan, and I'm thinking, especially the next stage after it, 3, is also physical. So if you go hard out the gate, you might not last the day. So there's definitely some tactics that come into play, but I think you also just have to just grit your teeth and get on with it.
Stage and a half, man. Holy.
And speaking of stage 3, Super Gruppo, it starts with a mega loamy section to start, and then it's just so long and physical. What is your race plan heading into stage 3, like you mentioned?
Yeah, so the top bit is epic. Like, it's all smiles down there. I was like, if it continues like this, it's just going to be the best stage ever. And it started, epic for the first few minutes, and then it just gets harder and harder. And there's a pretty decent climb halfway down. So same sort of thing, like you want to just put the bit between your teeth and just go for it. But then you have to be clever, because if you blow up halfway down that, it's probably, on my GoPro, it was 15 minutes. Wow. So racing it might be 13, something like that. It's going to be an epic.
Yeah, so just basically pedal your eyeballs out down here.
It's going to be an epic. So that's stage 3. We come back for a technical assistance zone, which is remote, and then we're straight into stage 4. Now, speaking of epic and gnarly, stage 4 has one of the most iconic probably starts we've ever seen. You've raced this before. Yeah. Isabeau, tell us about stage 4.
I think the start is so iconic, like you just mentioned, and It's such a small part, but you really want to make sure you hit the right line on it and make sure you like stay on the bike, because you can actually lose the race here. You're not gonna win on this section, but I think it's so cool. Like every spectators are gonna be here, so you obviously want to be a bit stylish going through it. So I think everyone was like trying to find the coolest line on it, and I think it's cool. I was super happy, honestly, there was this technical section into the race, because before that, like Charlie Tay, I felt it was a bit too physical, but this stage is definitely like bringing a bit of downhill vibes into it. There is still a steep climb in it, but it's actually a technical one, so I won't complain this time. But I think for me it's the best stage of the race tomorrow. I loved it.
And so varied. You do the technical stuff, then the climb, then the bottom is kind of similar to some of the earlier stages, very pedally, turny, you're back into the trees.
Yeah, it's a bit like base NATO. You need to find the right flow in the turns to like keep the momentum out of it. Otherwise, you ended up like pedaling in between each one. We might still pedal between each one, but I think it's been very important to have the right amount of speed when you exit the turn.
Now, speaking of iconic and some more downhill stages, you mentioned the pedally stages from 1, 2, 3, and this very spicy stage 4, stage 5, the icon of Finale, one of the most prestigious stages we've had in enduro history, downhill men's. It's back on the calendar. Tell us how stage 5 is running.
I'm super happy we get to race it again, because I mean, you know it, like when you race this one, it's such a special feeling with all of the spectators cheering for you from the start right to the bottom. And I think I kind of missed it during the previous edition here in Finale. So I think it's gonna be amazing, and I'm just looking forward to it. And I think also right now it's quite different. It's not as rough as it used to be. They had a lot of turns in between the sections, so I think it's gonna be quite tricky actually to not get the pressure of the crowd and, you know, just make a small mistake in some of the turns. So we'll need to keep the fire down.
Charlie, your first Finale Enduro was back in 2018, so you may have watched or missed those early epic downhill men's events we were just talking about. But how do you feel coming into that stage here, knowing there's so much prestige and so much energy that can be taken from all the spectators on a stage like that?
Yeah, it's epic. We got to race it in Trophy of Nations 2 years ago, and that was the best feeling ever. Bombing it down with your buddies, all in a train, just ripping through the crowd. It's like you can't even script it. So it'll be the same as that tomorrow, and it's pretty exciting because you have that top bit which is more flowy and high speed with some jumps, so it's actually really fun. And then you get to the pylon and you're like, all right, buckle in your seatbelts, because now it just drops straight down towards the sea and it's just blue, and then you're just looking at the rocks and just going through the chunder trying to get down that section. But the crowd, you know, you just hang on and the crowd are cheering. It works.
It works. It works. We are back in the home of Enduro, Finale Ligure. We've got a 5-stage monster in store for our athletes here. It's shaping up for a very physical day, a very varied amount of terrain through 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Charlie, Isabeau, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck tomorrow. We cannot wait to see you trackside.
Thank you very much.
Stay tuned.